Welcome back to the Rick Wyman Show. This is number 5, and we've got some questions to address. There are always questions on the Rick Wyman Show that we'd like to address. Primarily, what's up with the arena and why hasn't a lease arrangement been finalized? So we've brought in a special guest to address that in just a moment. As usual, Puckhead is joining us on today's Rick Wyman segment. And gentlemen, Blaine Smith is in the house to answer some vital questions in regards to lease arrangements and what's going on in the city of Greater Sudbury. Blaine, welcome to the show. In full transparency, you are retired now, so there's no affiliation with the Sudbury Cubs or the Sudbury Wolves, so you're a free agent.
That's right. Yeah, it's kind of a different feeling after 45 years.
Exactly. So congratulations on making it to the that retirement level. One day I will be joining you, hopefully sooner than later, but we'll see. But we're having fun doing this. So let's get to the questions, Blaine, and I'm sure Puckhead will be able to chime in momentarily in regards to what's going on. You know the scenario. You voiced some concerns publicly. The Sudbury Wolves are in the midst of getting a new arena, and the city wants a lease arrangement with the team. So primarily, a lot of people have been saying, what's a lease agreement all about? What constitutes a lease agreement between an OHL team and the city of Greater Sudbury? You've been at the table before. You have the answers because you, my friend, have the insight.
Well, I don't know if I have all the answers, Rick, but I can certainly give you a little bit of background history and what I've been through in negotiating lease agreements on behalf of the owner of the Wolves. It's not a great experience, to be honest with you, because both sides are at the table arguing for their particular side, and of course, the one thing I have learned over 30 years in the OHL, when going back to my Sam McMaster days, and be involved with leasing with negotiations with him and the city, is the lease is the number one most important aspect to owning a franchise. In other words, you can't put anything else on the table other than the fact, if I'm going to be successful as an owner of an OHL franchise, I need a fair and good lease agreement that allows me to at least break even financially. So that's one thing I have learned is, when you hear owners walking away from the table with the city, or it's going to take a long time to hammer this thing out. I mean, you're talking about negotiating a split on concessions, what the fees are going to be for every ticket that you sell, the advertising and portion and the split on the revenue there. I mean, the formula is pretty simple in the sense that the average has always been you need 3,500 fans on paid fans per game to break even during the regular season. That's kind of always been the standard, so to speak. And if how far you go in the playoffs, well, that's a bonus. And usually that money just gets reinvested back into the team. So to average 3,500 fans a game in Sudbury or any other market is difficult, quite frankly. And if I'm Dario Zulich, I'm not signing anything until I get an agreement that allows me to break even at the very least.
Puckhead, please weigh in. Really, I'm sure you're just itching to talk to Blaine.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rick. And Blaine, good to see you again, and good to have you with us this morning. I have a question for you, and it's talking about the lease, and it's this. What are the most challenging aspects in terms of negotiating? In other words, what were the sticking points that you would always have when you were dealing with the city regarding the lease?
Well, I think in the past, some of the sticking points were the fee that the city was charging the team per game. So in other words, part of the lease agreement is ice time for games, and ice time for practices, having a dressing room, having boardrooms, having a player's lounge, having office space. So all those things add up to, significant amount of real estate within the arena. And that to me was always number one sticking point, is what does that fee look like? And that's where the city says, well, it costs us X number of dollars for the mortgage, X number of dollars to run this facility. You've got this percentage of space that you're using and the amount of ice time we're providing you. This is what our fee will be. And when you look at that, sometimes you look at it and say, wow, 3,500 fans a game, there's no way we can afford this fee. On top of everything else, percentage of sale, percentage of advertising, percentage of food and beverage concessions, whatever. So again, it was always a big picture. You might agree to one or two aspects, but it was always that third or fourth final element that you had a hard time coming to grips with from a.
Is there an inherent danger, no deal, no rink, thus delaying the inevitable of perhaps, I know people have been saying 28, maybe 29, so why would the city even think about construction if they don't have a lease deal?
Yeah, that was one of my, I guess, concerns when I made a couple comments there in the past. Is I sure hope the city is not going to go ahead and begin construction without a signed lease agreement. I was actually working for Dario at the time when we was involved in negotiations with the city to have a lease agreement built on the Kingsway, the KAD, and he basically signed off on just about everything in agreement, because that building was going to be built on his property, and he was willing to provide some concessions that way. But now that the buildings are being built downtown, things change, and I don't blame him from his perspective. He wants to make sure that, again, he doesn't want to continue to lose money. Case in point, and to your point, Rick, the Mississauga Ice Dogs. I was just looking at their history. I mean, they have a beautiful facility, OHL rink. And I'm looking at their ownership groups. Don Cherry in 1998 with a bunch of a group sells to Nick Ritchie and Joel Albin in 2002. Nick Ritchie lasted a year. I remember talking to him at the OHL governor meetings, and he was telling me, he says, I just didn't realize how bad our lease agreement was with the city of Mississauga. Eugene Melnick comes in, buys a team 2006. He sells it a year later to Bill Burke. Bill Burke then moves the franchise to Niagara. So I guess to your point, do you ever think the Sudbury Wolves will leave Sudbury? Absolutely not. They're gonna work this out. There's no doubt in my mind. But here's an example of what can happen when you have a lease agreement where teams cannot break even.
Puckhead.
Yes, and Blaine, I have a question for you because, as you know, leases change over time. One of the issues that come up in leases quite often now the issue of seat licenses. And I'm wondering if that will complicate things as far as getting a lease agreement signed between the parties.
Yeah, that goes to our previous discussion about what are the fees going to be. So in other words, not only do you have a game fee that covers all the other costs of parking and everything else associated with running a team there, but seat licenses is another form of an additional cost or fee that the city and or team would potentially share in. I mean, you got suites to be negotiated. You've got club seats that have arguably licenses fees attached to those. It depends how you want to term all these different extras, so to speak, when it comes to preferred seating. We used to call them just club seats, and then some cities will say, well, we need to put a surcharge on those seats and X number of dollars. So I think right now, like, the Wolves are paying an average of, let's say, $4 or $5 a ticket for a fee. Well, when you move into a new arena, I mean, those surcharges have to increase significantly. So, is a surcharge going to be $7.50 a ticket, $10 a ticket? I don't know. That's something, again, the city and the team are going to have to negotiate. But whatever that surcharge or license fee is, that's going to be added to the cost of the ticket. And then the question becomes, how affordable are OHL tickets going to be to the
Puckhead and I have been talking about this for quite some time, and the league, I would think, Blaine, is going to get involved eventually because they're pushing for new facilities, Peterborough, Owen Sound, and even Sudbury, from what I can understand. So what kind of timeline do we have before maybe Brian Crawford comes to Dario Zulich and says, what's happening here? What are you going to do in regards to a new facility? Because we need new rinks. The pressure's on Peterborough right now. Brantford's going to get one, courtesy of the Hyman family. And of course, Owen Sound is, well, it's Owen Sound. And what's going to happen in Sudbury? I mean, what are we looking at? Could this be extended next year, 18 months?
Yeah, in terms of the league involvement, I remember standing at center ice with Dave Branch during Dale Hunter's jersey retirement ceremony, and he looked up at the rafters, he looked at me, and he says, "You guys need a new arena." So, I mean, the league does get involved in saying, yes, we need to upgrade these facilities. North Bay's been renovated a couple times now. It was Stu built in 2006 for $35 million. Owen Sound is probably, and Peterborough has had major renovations. Owen Sound's had major renovations. So I think as long as there's always progress in terms of the facility and making it comfortable for Wolves fans, I think that's key. But you're right. I mean, Rick, the perfect example is what happened in Belleville. I mean, none of us knew that the league and the owner of the Belleville Bulls was moving his team to Hamilton. This, 10 years ago or 8 years ago, whatever it was. It just happened because the owner of Belleville could not come to terms with the city on the arena and what he felt he needed for a new facility. I think you all read the media of what went on in Oshawa over the last couple of years, where the owner of Oshawa General was going to move his team to Pickering or Ajax or something. And that was the threat. And Oshawa, mayor said, yeah, go ahead if that's what you want to do. At the end of the day, they just struck a new 15-year agreement. And I'd love to see the terms on that. But I think, as you're touching on, Rick, as time goes on, the pressure begins to mount. And then the pressure becomes on the city. It becomes also on the owner of the team. So that's where both sides kind of eventually get forced into coming together and sawing off a deal.
I know Puckhead and I have been talking about the price of a new arena, and Puckhead, we've talked about $200 million and a lot more to be spent on a new rink compared to, well, other facilities. In Brantford, they're looking at $150. What say you on the cost of a new rink in terms of where that money should go? And Puckhead, we both agree $200 million is a lot of money.
It certainly is, Rick. And I'm going to make 2 points that I think are important here. The first thing that I'll say is that it is a lot of money. And people do have to realize that the Brantford Arena is cheaper because it's a smaller seating capacity. That's why we have the difference in the costs. The other thing that we also need to understand, and it's part of life when you have a new arena, your new arena is only new for so long. And what I mean by that is that even the London Knights, who are the bellwether franchise of the league, this year they've undergone substantial renovations at their Budweiser Gardens. So people have to understand this is not a one-time only deal. You're going to have to continue to renovate because you need to continue to have a modern arena. And that means you have to spend money on a continuous basis.
And you've got to have the product on the ice. So let's shift gears, as my good friend Tony Rima would say. What are the challenges, Blaine? And of course, you've seen them all in terms of icing a competitive team in Northern Ontario. We've heard the rumblings, and of course, now we have social media, guys texting, talking. They're complaining, they're happy, they like the situation, they don't like the situation. So how difficult, as a general manager in Greater Sudbury, that you've experienced in terms of being able to get the right players and the right team on the ice?
Well, I really believe, having watched Sam McMaster back in the 90s as our general manager of the club and how successful he was in bringing in excellent players, trading for players, drafting players, recruiting players. I just think of his time and the great job he did. I look at Mike Foligno and the job that he did in 2007 with a team that I think finished fifth, and then went all the way. It was up 2-1 in the finals. And the one common denominator there is just having the ability to draft the right players, make the right changes, and is there luck involved? Absolutely. I thought one year there, against Owen Sound, we had that two goals called back, I think, in the playoff game, and then Owen Sound went on, I think, to go to the finals. But anyway, it's one of those things there. People say, well, Sudbury will never get the best players to come here. I said, well, if you look at the team's performance since, let's just say, 1990, I think the NHL or the Hockey News did a report on it. The Wolves have the most number of graduates playing 200 plus games in the NHL, other than any other CHL franchise. So I think we've always had the ability to attract and bring players in. I think we've had very good coaching, but as you know, getting past the second round has always been the challenge. One year, is it goaltending? Is it defense? Is it forwards? Just putting it all together. So I guess that's where coaching, leadership, luck all comes into play. Is Sudbury the only team that's never won? Absolutely not. We can go through a number of teams that have failed to make it to the OHL finals or lost, but rather than look at a glass half empty, you got to wonder, why is the London Knights so successful? And I think you look at the Hunters and the connections that they have, the network that they have. They've been in the league for 30 plus years, and they just have a great network of bringing in free agents from the United States, from the USHL, from colleges, and they just bring in these guys, draft well, develop well, and the success speaks for itself.
Puckhead.
Yes. One of the things that I was going to ask Blaine was this, and it's talking about scouting. And of course, scouting is an integral part of icing your team and being successful. You see a kid who's 15 or 16 years old. When you scout a player, how much are we looking at the actual talent that you see, and how much is projection of the future?
Oh, that's a great question. I can assure you that talent is the number one criteria in selecting players at the OHL draft. You look at a player who's 15 years of age, and as you know, that rule changed about 20 years ago, where we used to draft 16-year-olds, not 15-year-olds. So that makes it even tougher. So going down to a 15-year, who knows how a player is going to draft? Or develop. You look at what he's doing right now as a 15-year-old and hopefully project that he's going to continue to improve. I can give you examples of players that fit into that, exactly what I'm saying here, and did not progress and ultimately did not play or did not finish their OHL careers. On the other hand, you have players, and I'll give you a perfect example. Sean Monahan. Interviewed him at the table. He was not a great skater as a minor midget. He played with Matthew Campagna that year. But again, skating is all we ever hear. You got to be able to skate in order to keep up the OHL. Well, Sean Monahan has turned out to be one heck of an NHL player. So skating alone is not the criteria for selecting a player. It's the overall skill package that you're getting. It's the smarts. It's being able to make plays and know what to do with the puck on the ice, as opposed to just dumping it in or making a bad turnover. So I mean, all these aspects of selecting players, it's all based on talent, and you hope that the player will continue to progress and become a dynamite player as a 19-year-old.
Blaine, I'll leave you with this. Is there a geographical buy-in that teams in Sault Ste. Marie, North Bay, and Sudbury need? Because now, between agents, parents, friends, family, a lot of players don't want to leave the nest egg down south. How do you entice them to come to the north? And I'll use Byfield as a great example. Came to Sudbury, did his time. Where is he now? Doing extremely well with the Kings. And a lot of kids don't want to leave because kids are thinking differently these days. Before, where players like, Dave Hunter would come up, do his time in Sudbury, went on to a great NHL career. Is that a problem in terms of trying to entice talent as well?
Well, let's face it. When you see the success of the London Knights, in how many players they've had drafted in the last 10, 15 years, whatever, and moved on, to NHL status, most kids in Southern Ontario want to play for the London Knights. It's just perceived success.
It's like the Alabama of football,
Exactly. It's just, and quite frankly, I went through that, and our organization franchise went through that. When you have a couple of bad years, the one thing that we haven't touched on in all this is the role of an agent. And if you have a good relationship with the player agents, that the Patty Morrises from Newport, all the top end guys that can get you the top players, that's what actually the most important thing, because their agents are the one that convince the players and the family to go somewhere. I remember getting phone calls the morning of an OHL draft saying, "Don't take our player, he's not going to report." You couldn't tell me this a month ago or 2 weeks ago or whatever. But this is what the agents can do to interfere and or help you get a good, acquire a good player. So when it comes to getting players to come from Southern Ontario up north, yeah, if you've got a great relationship with the agent and he knows you've got a good program, he knows you're looking after the players, the players will come. There's no question. And but on the other hand, if you've ticked off some agents or you mistreated one of their players, good luck trying to get one of his players to come back here. And after 30 years of running the Sudbury Wolves franchise, I can assure you that there were some agents that did not want to send their players to us for some things that went on in the past or whatever. And I'm also hearing it with the current group as well. It's just the nature of the beast, and it's unfortunate that the agents have this kind of power, but that's reality.
Okay, Blaine, I really thank you for taking the time to fill us in on some of the gaps. Puckhead and I are wondering about your World Series prediction, because after all, the Toronto Blue Jays, that I know everyone's watching beginning Friday night. What's your call on the Dodgers and Jays in the World Series? It's been a long time for Toronto, so we want to hear your call.
Well, being a Detroit Tigers fan,
exactly,
after
exactly.
being knocked out, it was nice to see for Toronto. I just feel for the Blue Jays to knock off Seattle the way they did, being down 2-0 and coming back and win 4-5. That's pretty impressive. And getting caught up in the hype that just went on in the last game there in Game 7, I got to put my money on the Blue Jays to win the World Series.
Forthright. What do you think, Puckhead? That's forthright.
It is very forthright, and you may even get a forthright prediction from me later on in the show.
We will. Blaine, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I'm sure we will follow up, because this saga, it's like the never-ending story. It will continue down the road. Have yourself a great weekend.
Thanks, Rick. For a pleasure having me on. Thank you.
Okay, Blaine Smith, of course, retired now, former general manager of the Sudbury Wolves and involved, of course, with the Greater Sudbury Cubs. He's also retired from that and moving on in his retirement. We'll take a break. This is the Rick Wyman Show, brought to you by Sorta Local. And don't forget, big shout out going out to Ed, who is an avid follower. He wants us to get on Spotify. We're working on that right now. But we'll be back with more in just a moment. Back with Puckhead on the Rick Wyman Show. And of course, we just heard Blaine's prediction. Puckhead, what are you thinking about the World Series? Jays are in it. We've been texting each other feverishly over the course of the last couple of weeks about what's going down. So what do you think?
Well, let's step back a little bit because I think there's a couple of facts that we should talk about before we get into the World Series. And I want to put out to the readers what a great comeback the Blue Jays put forward in Game 7. As you may remember, Rick, the Seattle Mariners were up 3-1 in the bottom of the seventh inning.
That's right.
And Seattle had a leadoff walk in the top of the 7th. When that happened, the Blue Jays had a 15.5% chance of winning this game. Fast forward 4 outs. That is the 3 Seattle outs. You'll remember that the Blue Jays had 2 base runners. They had a walk and they had a single, and then they had a sacrifice. And then George Springer hit the home run, heard all around Canada and all around the baseball world. When that home run was hit, the Blue Jays win probability went up to 77.5%. So in the course of 4 outs, we had 120% change in the win probability.
And you didn't call your bookie. I didn't call my bookie, because had you laid $100 easily, you could have turned that around and made a few grand on that bet.
You certainly could. And, with gambling these days, there might have been somebody who did that. So if they did, hey, shout out to them. They did a great job. But it was a fantastic comeback. And, of course, the other thing that went unnoticed was the pitching of Kevin Gausman and Chris Bassett in the 7th and 8th inning as emergency relievers. They did a fantastic job. As you know, Rick, these pitchers are starting pitchers. To come in a Game 7 situation with the season on the line was incredible. So I'm not ducking your question, Rick. I'm going to answer it now. But this series is going to be a really good series. I think that most people will favor the Dodgers. Why? Well, the Los Angeles Dodgers probably have a lineup that I haven't seen, at least in the top 3. And you'll remember the top 3 of the Dodgers if you watch the Milwaukee series: Ohtani, Betts, and Freeman. Put a comma after those 3 names and put the initials HOF after that. That stands for Hall of Fame. These guys that I just mentioned are Hall of Famers. Full stop right there.
Well,
so the challenge.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So the challenge for the Jays, Rick, is to handle the top 3 hitters in the LA lineup. Got to handle Ohtani, got to handle Betts, got to handle Freeman, and then the rest of the lineup. I think the Jays will give a very good account of themselves. I can see this being a 6 or a 7 game series. Now, I'm sure you've watched the whole season with the Blue Jays, and what struck me is how many times the team needed to come back and things needed to happen absolutely perfectly. And that's exactly what happened in Game 7, Rick, and that's why I went back to it. I just have a funny feeling that even though the Dodgers may have a more talented roster, that the Jays may be a team of destiny. And sometimes when you're a team of destiny, it doesn't matter who you play. So I'm going to go way out on the limb, and people can call me foolish in a week or 2 when the series ends, but I'm going to say Jays win in 7 games.
Okay. I'm going to go Dodgers in 5, maybe 6. I'm thinking the Jays just can't overextend themselves one more time, because this is going to be a tough lineup that they're up against. And, of course, as you just alluded to, so I'm just thinking this is going to be a difficult matchup. And, again, it's going to be one of those factors where the pitching has got to be well above average. If Scherzer gets another crack at pitching, he's got to play, well, okay, how can you top his last performance? Pitch the game of his playoff life. Yasavage, will the pressure get to him? Start him at home. We'll see what happens. The crowd's going to play a big factor into Toronto's success at home. So if Toronto can get off to an early jump, there's a chance. But the thing is, you head back to L.A. for games 3, 4, and 5, and I think that's where the Dodgers might have that advantage. I've been wrong about the Jays all season long, but you know what? I hope I'm wrong this time, but I just can't see it. Looking at the metrics of the Dodgers, just too tough a team. A couple of other things that I want to touch upon. What's up with the F-bombs in post-game celebrations? John Schneider speaking at will, dropping F-bombs on national TV. This is becoming something new. I think it was Scherzer and Springer that did it previously, but Is this becoming commonplace on television post-game celebrations?
Seems to be, Rick, and it's always humorous because during the broadcast, as you know, there's a time delay. So if someone says something they shouldn't say on TV, we don't hear it. In the clubhouse, they don't have the time delay, so you get to hear everything that is being said. And if there's profanity and not very nice language, well, you better have very, very, shall I say, experienced ears to put up with some of the vocabulary. I think it's just the emotion of the moment. I can appreciate what those players have been through. It's a very grueling season. Baseball, in my mind, is the most grueling of all the sports. It may not be the most physical game, but it's mentally absolutely exhausting. And by now, the Blue Jays and the Dodgers will be well over 200 games, including spring training and playoffs.
Okay, I've just been told we got to wrap things up. Moron of the week, by the way, I've got to get this in. Brad Marchand, come on. $5,000 fine for grabbing Rasmus Dahlin's helmet and yanking off the straps. Like, really, hasn't the NHL or will the NHL ever do anything to curtail such stupid activity? But again, it's Brad Marchand. Guy knows how to play hockey. He doesn't have to debase himself to that extent, but it's just what he does. If he's not sticking out his tongue and kissing people or licking hockey equipment or faces, he's just coming up with new antics. So I don't know. I guess with Marchand, it's just going to continue. But again, I'm just we got to eliminate that nonsense.
When you're a star, Rick, there's more latitude given to you.
Yes.
And I agree that Brad Marchand gets into all kinds of antics, but you cannot, under all that, this guy is another Hall of Fame player. And that's why he gets away with what he gets away with.
I guess he never learned the lesson or took the class about taking the higher road. But again, he is what he is. Thanks for dropping by once again this week. We are wrapping up the Rick Wyman Show. Will we be back next week? We'll have to wait and see. We appreciate your comments. And again, just let us know. Subscribe. Tell your friends. Kiss some babies. Shake some hands. And spread the word. Because as far as I'm concerned, T-Puck, we are not going away. Have a really good week.
You too.
Okay. That's the Rick Wyman Show for this week. Back in 7 days with more.